make it clear.
Order. I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very, very, very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, here's a life member of the Devonport militia, speechwriter, tweeter and militant cyclist, David Slack. And here's an author, a columnist and political commentator, proof the revolution will be televised, blogger Chris Trotter. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1. The National Party conference in Auckland last weekend spelled out that this key ain't for turning. Shouldn't National feel confident about winning 2014? Issue 2. Has the asset sales sweetener become 5,000 shades of grey over costs in less than a week? And issue 3. Do Labour's changes to how they elect their leader herald a new golden age of democratic enlightenment in New Zealand politics? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. The National Party conference in the weekend saw more police than protesters at a venue overshadowed by a smelly convention centre for pokies deal. Benny bashing, more oil drilling and mining were the main outcomes, while National's poll ratings continue to soar. Should the government be feeling confident for 2014? David, has Key gone beyond Teflon to a new material that defies gravity? He's untouchable, isn't he?
Oh, no, I don't think he's untouchable. He has an interesting insight he offered, I forget the interview, possibly with Guy and Espiner a while ago, where he said that the things that people like about him are going to be the same things that undo him in the end, which was intriguing. And I suspect that what he sees is that people tire of everybody eventually, no matter what they are and what they stand for. But more crucially, if you look at the polling, they peaked some time ago. They're coming down, and I think that people are going to compare their own circumstances to the more hopeful circumstances he's been painting, and as time runs along, they're going to ask themselves, why does this never change? And I think that's, in the end, what's most likely to undo him. But I think the growing block of the Greens and Labour are clearly unnerving him, and he's spending more time talking about what's wrong with them than he once did. And I think that tells you that the trader knows that actually the tide's going out.
Right. Chris, 500 delegates, though, isn't flabby. Could National still fantasise about majority government in 2014, or will they still need coalition partners? And if they do, who are they going to be?
Well, the Roy Morgan poll, which was released very recently, showed for the first time the Conservative Party rating at 3%.
Yeah.
Now, that must be very worrying news for the left opposition, because what it says to me is that even though National maintains an extraordinary lead over Labour, something close to 20 percentage points, it is now, to its right, acquiring what could be a viable political force, possibly capable of crossing the 5% threshold or the 4% threshold if these changes take place to MMP. In which case, the bothersome Maori Party can be jettisoned in complete safety.
Sure.
And if the country is beginning to look upon the likes of Mr. Craig's Conservatives favourably, the chances are they will be looking reasonably favourably upon Mr. Peters as well,
right,
who's also in that Conservative, with a small c, part of the spectrum. And it suggests to me that Labour and the Greens will have to work very hard to hold their support, let alone grow it. And I think this must be what National's internal polling is showing them, because they came out swinging at that conference. They put Labour and the Greens in their sights. Now, Labour's not as vulnerable to these sort of attacks from the National Party as the Greens are. I think there are a lot of people who in the last few months have been flirting with the idea of voting Green perhaps at the next election, who can be easily frightened off by full-scale attacks from the right.
Right.
And I think National, and probably it's Crosby Textor Advisors, if they're still on National's payroll, will be telling them this. You won the first term by being the friend of everyone and promising not to change anything. You won the second term by being gutsy and putting things out on the line, like asset sales, and relying on Labour's disarray to get you a second term. The third term you really will have to fight for, and the best way to win it is to say to New Zealanders, I know things are tough, but really, if you're thinking about changing horses in midstream, would you choose those horses?
Yeah. David, you never lose votes by bashing dirty, filthy bennies. And this conference didn't disappoint, with beneficiaries being threatened to lose half their benefit if they don't comply to a list of do's and don'ts. When this is aimed at middle classes, it's called nanny state. When it's aimed at the poor, it's sensible social policy. How much further can National use the Benny Bash strategy?
Only until Russell Norman makes a wizard little pie chart that demonstrates to people what the welfare spend is in this country, and I predict that's only days away, because there's nothing if not canny. And what that will show is that most of the welfare budget goes on national superannuation. This is our far and away most expensive item, and the debate about what that qualifying age should be is a strong one, and one that the National Party is studiously ignoring and hoping will go away, but it won't. And if it were to be demonstrated to people just how minuscule the proportion of money goes on these supposed blights on our economy, these demonised minorities, that argument would wither on the vine.
But it does have impact, doesn't it? You listen to Talkback, and they are baying for blood.
So bring on the pie chart. You know? Just a point about that Conservative Party. It occurs to me that when was it, in 2005 election, a lot of those rural electorates, like all of the Hawke's Bay ones and Wairarapa and all, a lot of those provincial electorates all went over to National, and I suspect that is where you have a real possibility of a rural rump emerging, that the Conservative Party might well fashion itself towards.
And we'll talk about this later in the show, but that's a very good point about the loss of the provinces. There was a time when Labour had 85,000 members and had a real presence from Kaitaia all the way down to Bluff. In other words, there were Labour Party members who went to branch meetings and were available for organisation even in heartland national seats. Now, there are vast swathes of New Zealand
just lost
that don't have any Labour people
at the very point. At the very point when MMP would have actually shown some fruit of that.
What was fascinating to me about the last days of the alliance before it became part of the government, the famous Taranaki King Country by-election, it showed that if you put the effort in, and God knows Matt McCartan and his team put the effort in there, you can win small rural booths like Eltham, which you would have thought was utterly impossible. The provinces are not devoid of people willing to vote for the left. It's like the myth in America that the South has gone to the Republicans, it's irrecoverable, you shouldn't even waste time campaigning there. There are plenty of Democrats born and bred in the South who say, that's not true. You guys should pay more attention. You should not write off the rednecks. Some of them are available if you pitch it right.
There seemed to be more focus on the lack of protesters than what was actually said in the conference. Do the masses love National, or they just completely over public protests?
I think the public protest movement needs to sit down and have a hard think about both its strategies and its tactics. I think there are a lot of people who are potential protesters, but they're not responding to the sort of messages that those who are organising the current round of protests are giving them. But, the beneficiary bashing is something that happens at National Party Conference. These are, the dyed-in-the-wool Tories who like nothing more than to see someone like Mrs. Bennett, stand up and deliver these wonderful messages promising to put the slothful city folk to rights.
Yes.
This is what the country people have been doing, for more than a century in New Zealand. It's rural virtue versus urban vice.
Yes.
That's what
right.
it's all
Yes,
about.
Yeah, and they sell it well. Final question to both of you. Do you think there's a second honeymoon between the government and the mainstream media? I mean, there are a couple of things said at the conference. For example, Bill English saying we shouldn't be crying over New Zealanders leaving for Australia when that was a central plank of their policy in 2008. And we also had this other situation where Bill English was holding up a Herald Digipole of all things to claim that New Zealanders were supportive of more mining and more oil drilling. A critical media would pull them up on those, wouldn't they?
Oh, well, on the first point, the collective amnesia of modern media is a godsend for a government like this that abandons its promises. And, you've got 22-year-olds who are asked to do 10 stories a day, and they were barely alive when David Lange was Prime Minister. Your hopes of having the government called to question are slim. I would note that the photographs the New Zealand Herald chose to cover that conference don't suggest an enduring love. Those are not honeymoon snaps I would put on Facebook.
John Key was the one who broke up that relationship. It wasn't the mainstream media. Are they being wooed again?
Well, I think it's you who's been pointing out repeatedly that there's $120 million in advertising.
A lot of money.
Dangling in front of a newspaper industry that's on its knees. And it's all in the gift of the government of the day. And so perhaps editors and their boards of directors are saying, let's not bite the hand that could potentially feed us $120 million.
That's right.
So there's that aspect, and that's always been there in the news media. These are profit-making enterprises. Let's not forget. Has the news media fallen back in love with John Key after the Teapot tapes? I'm not sure. I am very puzzled by Key's behaviour over the Teapot tapes. One wonders whether or not there was a bit of Crosby Textor there. He said,
they did the polls
nobody ever loses votes by attacking journalists. People hate journalists
that's right.
even more than they hate politicians.
That's right.
So who knows what was behind that?
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, Tracy Watkin from the Don Post declared after Key's sweetener asset sale deal announcement at the conference that the heat had been taken out of asset sales. 24 hours later, Key's inability to actually tell us how much it would cost had turned that confidence into 5,000 shades of grey. David, is this National Party policy on the hoof again? Shouldn't they know how much taxpayer money this is going to cost?
Yes, and yes. Next question.
Excuse me. They're in the habit of this, aren't they?
Oh, they are. And what struck me consistently in the last few months is the way what John Key says today is not necessarily what he said yesterday, but he will assert that in every instance he is right, and he would like you to forget he ever said anything previously. And in management, you're allowed to get away with that because everybody hails to the chief for as long as he's the chief. And none of them have really broken stride from the way they behaved as managers in the private sector. And that's really what's going on here. He's saying, oh, I like the look of this, we'll do this. Somebody will have to crunch some numbers here. He's forgetting that he's saying it in front of people who don't actually think this is a good idea. And so he's going to be called to account for it. And called to account he has been. And he has enthusiastically embraced one of the commentators who the analysts who fortunately and obligingly observed that the price might rise and therefore there would be no cost in the sale in the bonuses. But of course that is something of an illusion. We're still working with an item that actually is being sold when in fact if we kept it we would be getting a high yield and an increasing one over time. The whole thing is a complete bloody margin call at best, and they're just brazening it out because a whole lot of their friends love these things because they make out like bandits doing it.
Chris, with the New Zealand average wage being less than $48,000, how many mums and dads will have a spare $1,000 to buy these shares?
Probably more than you would think. You know, if you hold up a blank sheet of paper and you put a dot in the middle, you say, what is that? People always say, it's a dot, but it's not. It's a big expanse of white with a tiny little dot in the middle. And in a way, our society is a bit like that. Most people have jobs. Most people lucky enough to have full-time jobs are doing all right. You know, it's beneficiaries, it's people who are only working part-time or intermittently who are struggling. Those who are earning 45, 50, and the moment you get into the salariat, as opposed to the proletariat, the average income goes up quite sharply.
Sure. Yep.
So those people, and this, after all, is what the National Party really means when they talk about mums and dads.
Yes, yes.
They talk about mums and dads from Remuera and Pendleton and
Yes.
Murray Hill. The mums and dads they see every day in their SUVs dropping their kids off at the school gate. Those are the mums and dads they're thinking of. They're not thinking of mums and dads from Otahuhu or Porirua.
Oh, Lord, no.
No.
David, does the need to make this first sale work explain the sweeteners and the antagonism aimed at the Māori Council? I mean, he's got to make this first one work, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think I think that whole issue was another demonstration of his talking loosely and talking like the boss.
Really?
In the sense of saying, well, of course, we can just legislate away. We don't have to pay attention to this because they have no respect for the levers of democracy. Because I don't think they even grasp their significance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm not saying they're evil people. I know they're not evil people, but they're quite stupid. In my opinion, in what they don't understand about how democracy functions. And so a tribunal and its workings, a judiciary and its workings are all fundamental to how we find resolution of our differences. And for a Prime Minister to say, oh, I don't give a flying trick what they think, was the antagonism that kicked it all off.
And the other bonus, of course, of those offhand comments of the Prime Minister was that it threw a very large chunk of red meat at his anti-Maori audience. And on the right, the anti-Maori audience is sadly
hungry,
very large, and yes, by this stage, quite hungry. Because no one's thrown them any red meat.
That's right, for
since
ages.
Orewa.
That's right, and they're hanging for it. Chris, Bill English pointed out that austerity could be a generational issue if the global economy turns again. If the global economy turns, will adopting more free market policy be the answer?
Well, that seems to be the answer, primarily I think because the left across the whole of the Western world has failed to come up with a better one. A left worthy of the name in North America and Europe and down here in Australasia would have seized upon the global financial crisis and remoulded themselves around core social democratic principles. The only left-wing figure in New Zealand who's come anywhere near doing this is David Cunliffe, and he was slapped down and told that he was naive and stupid for even thinking such things, let alone saying them out loud. And so the default position remains the default position. People waiting to hear from David Shearer, for example, when he said he was going to have positioning speeches, 1, 2, 3, 4. They listened to the first couple and thought, oh, well, that was hardly earth-shattering. It sounds like more of the same. You know, we've heard about this knowledge-based economy before. I mean, there's nothing new there. And so Bill English is right. I mean, Rob Campbell, bless his little capitalist socks, was the guy who told me right at the time of the global financial crisis, A, that it was going to take a generation to work its way through, and B, that his biggest concern as that was happening was the maintenance of social cohesion.
Really? Final question of both of you. With only 5% of New Zealand predicted to buy these shares, is the $60 to $80 million, is that justifiable?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I do think it's a good idea, if you have the money, to buy them, because they're a really good asset and we shouldn't be selling them. That's why I think it's a bad idea we're selling them. But given that that's happening, I would hope that New Zealanders would be investing in them, because it's that would vouchsafe the security of our energy production here.
And,
60,
and
$80
keep
million?
and keep the income stream flowing
Correct.
inwards rather than outwards.
Right. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, Labour has made wholesale changes to how they elect their leader, which will see members and affiliates having far more say than just the caucus. David, will these changes be enough to reach out to members and attract new ones?
Oh, that's an interesting question. There have been a couple of interesting comments on this on the Standard and on Chris's blog about this idea, and I imagine Chris will expound on this in a moment. But I liked in particular your idea, Chris, about how that you might encourage affiliates to be more engaged, because it's and that other post on the Standard in that respect I think chimed with you in saying that you've got an atomisation really of the left in political thinking. You've got people who are in all kinds of different interest groups and would happily work together in one cause, say, but not necessarily want to be rank and file members of the party. But if that organisation of theirs were able to affiliate with the Labour Party, then I'm all in favour of transforming politics in the 21st century so it fits the way people live now, because people won't go out to meetings in the way they once did. But they will get involved in certain things if it's a cause they're interested in. And if that's what it takes to get people re-engaged with politics and actually taking part and forming ideas and then submitting them and feeding it into the democratic process, then that's if this change can encourage that, then that would be a good thing.
You wrote a brilliant blog on this. What are your hopes?
Well, I'm putting my faith in the Labour Party rank and file and the wisdom of ordinary Labour Party members, because it won't work if the quite blatantly self-protective clauses that the caucus has insisted upon including in the review remain in place. Basically, what the caucus has said is, all right, we'll concede you this electoral college, 40% us, 40% rank and file, and 20% trade union affiliates or affiliates. But it's sort of like the general election. You get one go and that's it.
Right.
For the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't even get one then. Because you have to have 2/3 of the caucus in favour of holding a vote of no confidence in the leader before there can even be the beginnings of a challenge.
That's right.
In other words, 34% of the caucus can keep their man or their woman in place until such time as he or she presides over an election loss, and then presumably the party will get a say. Now, I don't think it should be possible to mount leadership challenges lightly or frivolously, but there should be provisions both for the members of the caucus by simple majority and the membership, perhaps by collecting a prescribed number of signatures, 500, 1,000, 10% of the membership, although parties don't like to know, let people know what the membership is, so perhaps 1,000 votes if you're being really cautious. And if someone can do that, if there's that much disquiet in the ranks of your party, then you should have a vote.
Sure.
The Electoral College should be able to put it to a vote. If that doesn't happen, then the dominance of caucus will remain.
Sure.
And while the caucus remains as powerful as it is, all the other changes won't amount to a hill of beans.
Let's wrap the show. David, your final word this weekend.
Cycling. The coroner had some interesting submissions made to him yesterday by people talking about what other cyclists were doing and not the cyclist who had been killed on Tamaki Drive. And it perturbs me to see this kind of thing happening, because we're only going to get a constructive resolution of this question by having calm heads and less vitriol and accusing one side or the other of being bad in what they and how they use the road is not going to get us anywhere. I heard an eminently sensible discussion on national radio this morning talking about how you might set things up for the cyclist and the motorist to live in harmony,
Yes.
and it was a joy to hear.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear a whole lot more constructive debate about it and a whole lot less slagging from one side to the other.
Chris, your final word this week?
Oh, look, I was absolutely aghast to learn that the Minister for Local Government, Mr. Carter, is floating the idea of restoring the Canterbury Regional Council, but with not only elected members, but appointed members. This is a complete break with what most New Zealanders understand their democracy to be about. Certainly, in the case of DHBs, there has been the mix of ministerial appointments and locally elected people. But that is the running of an institution ultimately funded by the state.
Yeah.
And so I think the state does have a case to make. But local government is funded from another revenue base altogether, from citizens' rates. And besides which, it has a huge purview. And the whole concept of subsidiarity, that is of taking democratic decisions down to the lowest practical level so that that's near people as possible, has always been at the heart of our constitution. And this is just astounding and a very bad portent for the future.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. There are not many moments in my life where I'm absolutely astounded beyond the point of speech. Brothers and sisters, we have reached that moment. This week, at the inquiry into the determination of the well-being for Māori children, the committee chair, Tao Henare, while listening to testimony from the Cancer Society on why smoke-free environments are important for children, questioned their comments with claims that smoking during pregnancy was not dangerous to the child. What was Tao's evidence to this jaw-dropping assertion? He knew lots of Māori women who had smoked during pregnancy, and all of their kids were fine. National spent the weekend berating Labour for living on another planet. Well, I'm not sure what planet National live on, but apparently smoking during pregnancy isn't a health hazard there. This isn't a left or right issue. This is undiluted ignorance that serves no one on the political spectrum. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Don't forget my new show, The Union Report, plays 8 p.m. Monday nights here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on